the idea that you have to make farms larger and more industrialized is countering the actual data. The data is about 70 to 80% of the food we eat, not trade. Containers only have commodities. What we eat is what comes from small farms. Because we have to eat many things, and what's globally traded? About 10 commodities. Yeah? And the 80% small farms are what really feed the world. Now, if you shift to organic, I have a book called Who Really Feeds the World that I was asked to write for the Milan Expo. The expo in Milan, its theme was feeding the world. And they appointed me ambassador, and of course the biotech industry got hyper. They organize, it's fascinating. I said, can you leave me alone, please, Anything that happens anyway, Sri Lanka happens, Expo happens, their entire armies mobilize. So I wrote this book because they said, we want to really know who really feeds the world. So I have chapters on the small farms. The biodiversity produces more. That's what our farm shows. If you measure a commodity, you'll see only one thing. But you measure biodiversity, you will see all the biodiversity and all its ecological functions and all its nutritional output. So the argument that without chemicals we can't feed the world is what they've been telling since they brought chemicals into farming. And as I've written in this book, I've quoted Rachel Carson and Albert Howard. Both of them said these chemicals came from war. Synthetic fertilizers were explosives. Haber-Bosch, who made the synthetic fertilizers, they were basically part of running Hitler's war, making the poison gases. The wife of Haber committed suicide because she was a very sophisticated chemist, and she told him, stop doing this. You're killing people. And I think he didn't listen. She committed suicide. So this myth of, chemicals feed the world and organic can't, I think it's the central biggest block in the transition. Because when you get rid of that myth, I wasn't supposed to spend all my life figuring this myth out, but now I have. So I'm going to do it the right way. Hoshangabad is a very strong organic movement, very strong. Because there used to be, try and remember, a Friends Rural Center which took up the issue of natural farming, farming without chemicals. Marjorie Sykes was her name, Gandhian. And then a whole new generation, Pratap Agarwal and others picked that up. And when we created the organic movement in the 80s in India, about 7 of us who were really concerned about what the Green Revolution was doing, we got together to create a movement called Samvardhan. And one of the founding people was Banwari Lal Chaudhary, who used to be the head of agriculture in Orissa. And then when he found out all the harm, then he came back to his village near Hoshangabad. So there's Friends Rural Center and there's this other place which he started. So there are people who are doing the organic work. The thing is, this mycorrhizal connection, that's what's missing. A farmer cannot shift unless they connect to the eater. And I know now there are organic farmers markets in Hoshangabad. I know that because to inaugurate it I was called and I couldn't travel that night. But the shift is taking place. Yeah.
I know it's written in the books, but still I would like to know the personal narrative of yours, which is like,
Thoda जोर से बोलो.
how did you get involved with the Chipko movement?
So like I said, I grew up in the forest. I'm born literally, in the Chakrota Valley up there. My father was posted there when my mother had me, and I think they rushed down to Dehradun for the delivery. It's about 4 hours away. So I've grown up in the forest. And when I was leaving for Canada to do my studies there, I just wanted to do a quick trek and in a way take the forest with me. And I couldn't go too far because my flight was in 3 days' time or something. So I said, okay, I'll do a quickie and, come to Chamba and stayed in, up in Third Valley from here. And I remember an oak forest and a lovely stream, because oak forests conserve water. And they chopped the oak forest for apple plantations. And the stream that used to come from the oak, there were beautiful Chipko songs saying, from the leaves come the milk, because they feed the tender leaves to their cattle, and from the roots come the water. So they could see the ecological connections. So I saw this, and I'm so troubled. So I'm sitting, those days we had, even now we have these chai ka dhabas, roadside stalls where people make tea. And I'm waiting for the bus. And I start talking about how it hurts me, because I felt physical pain, because I felt the forests were part of me, the rivers were part of me. And I said, I can't believe this is happening. And this chai wala said to me, but now there's hope, because Chipko has started. So I said to him, what's Chipko? And he described how the women in Alaknanda Ghati had risen. And now there were blockades in every forest logging. Women would come in, sit together, then the loggers would move to another forest, the women there would organize. So I took a commitment that I was leaving for my higher studies, but I would come back every summer and every winter. Now, a fellowship doesn't give you that kind of money. But I noticed all the Canadians had a different fellowship. And we, third worlders, had less. And I had a big campaign. I said, how can you do this? How can you treat us as different? We're doing the same PhDs. Yeah? How can you treat us as second-class citizens? And it worked. So with that fat fellowship, I was able to come every year, twice a year. And then throughout, till it ended. 1981, the logging ban came. Of 78, there was another disaster. Uttarkashi is, where Bhagirathi starts in Gangotri. Uttarkashi is the first big town. And they'd done logging there. And the entire mountain had slipped into the river and formed a 4-mile lake. And when that lake burst all the way to Calcutta, the flood reached. So then the government realized that what the women were saying was true, that the real role of these forests is to protect the water system and the soil system. It is not creating timber mines. And after that, the logging was banned. But everything I learned, 3 things I learned from Chipko, that everyone has knowledge, You kind of, do your PhDs and you do your, work in a fast breeder reactor in nuclear. And you kind of, it's the sociology pumps you up, The sociology tells you you're superior to the others, not the epistemology. So when I learned so much, I knew a few trees, I knew a few ferns, but all the plants that the women knew and used. So I said they became my teachers in ecology and my teachers in biodiversity. And everything I did on agriculture was because of what I'd learned with Chipko. If I hadn't learned about diversity from Chipko and monocultures from Chipko, I couldn't have done this book. That time, the person who used to do the songs was called Ghanshyam Raturi, and he's a close friend of my mother's. So we had a lot of his songs. I know there is, I know UNESCO was making a film on 3 women, Wangari from Africa, I think Rigoberta Menchú from, people have forgotten her, she got a Nobel Peace Prize, and me for Asia, for the 1995 Women's Summit. So when they made that film, I remember the filmmakers had called Shialani to our house and they recorded. I don't know if the film has it. It's called Daughter of the Earth. It might have music in it. Because he's passed away too, Yeah?
A broader question. How do you envision for the transitioning the agricultural sector, and how do you envision it to remain open? Because clearly there's, other ways, not only of the way we make food, the way we move, the way we build, that need sustainable transitions. How do you envision the agricultural sector to remain open so that it can find synergies between these different transitions?
Well, agriculture is at the core, not only because agricultural livelihoods are the majority of livelihoods. But food is the most basic need. The thing is, you can cheat on food by substituting people with chemicals and machines. And then, of course, you can spin all kinds of, productivity, efficiency, etc., etc. But at the end of it, it catches up, right? 50% of the greenhouse gases come from an industrial agriculture system that's based on fossil fuels. Most people don't see fossil fuels as connected to farming. Synthetic fertilizers are fossil fertilizers. Synthetic pesticides are fossil pesticides. Long-distance supply chains are fossil distribution. So it's 50% of the emissions, and they are more deadly. Like nitrogen oxide is 300 times more damaging than carbon dioxide. So, the central myth, just like the cows were removed from India's streets, I remember when I have a little report I did then in the GATT days. There was no WTO then, but I read everything about how the United States had changed. And, an agriculture secretary has actually written, farmers are like toothpaste that must be squeezed out of the tube. The land must be emptied of farmers. And this was the thinking in the 70s, and, that's why farmers of America disappeared. So one externality that's catching up with us now is the whole Jalvayu Parivartan, of which a big part is climate havoc. But not only is it the big share, the biggest impact it has is on agriculture again. The second is health. You can make chemicals and then the chemicals catch up with you. Why do we have a cancer epidemic? So much research has already been done on toxics and their relationship to cancer. A few years ago, I was invited by the Cancer Society of India to give the keynote on the annual day. And I talked about what I'd learned. And it's amazing. Every woman in the room was a breast cancer survivor. Every woman said, but we've been told it's in our genes. 5% cancers are related to genes. The rest are in the environment, from the toxics in our environment and in our food. So if on such a basic level we are constantly made to think it's us, it's because of us. The second is ultra-processed food, responsible for 75% chronic diseases. And now I've just done a new book. The big false solution is fake food. Just stop, farming without farmers and food without farms is the slogan of Silicon Valley. So they say we've made so much money, making everyone pay us rents, every year, pay Google, every year, pay Microsoft, just keep paying. Now they're saying, why don't we do it with food? Navdanya started because they wanted to do it with seed. That's when Monsanto wanted to own and patent seed. I said, no, we were going to save seeds. So the transition, first of all, is a transition in our thinking. We've got to get out of the mechanistic reductionist frame of mind, which is so artificial, but it got so much power because it served the empire.